what is going on, everyone? It is me, Mr. Mario, and yes, we are back again with another Gaming Goof segment. There was actually one more console I wanted to talk about in general, and this is the Ouya. Now, many of you might know what this is, and you're just like, oh god, okay, this system, we're talking about this now. And other people might be wondering what it is, and don't worry, if you're one of those people, I'll explain it right now. The Ouya is a little pretty much home console that was $99, and it was based on the Android platform. It was running Android operating system on it. It was heavily modified, you know, to make it easy for a controller to use and everything. And it was just a box that was, you know, it would fit in the palm of your hand. It was about, you know, this big or so. And you just hooked it up to the back of your TV through HDMI. It came with one wireless controller, and even with that, because it is Android, you could hook up a 360 controller, a PS3 controller, and you could even, I believe, you could do a PS3 controller wirelessly to it. They also heavily modified the marketplace as well. They made not an Android, an Ouya specific marketplace is what I'm trying to say, just for games that were kind of, you know, more optimized for it and everything. But it is Android OS, which means it is very open. You could really do anything with it. I mean, hell, you could... One thing I like about the Android operating system is you could pretty much go out and buy any Android device, and you have a retail device and a dev kit all in one. And you could do the same thing with this. And at $99, it was a steal. It had a Tegra 3 processor in it, and it seemed like it was going to be good. But you might be wondering, if it is so awesome and so good, and for that price, $99... why didn't it get more attention? Was it bad? Was the market not ready to embrace Android OS, you know, next to the 360 and the PS3? Because this came out, you know, during this generation. Didn't come out when the next-gen systems were out. Well, you know, I'd like to say we learned a few things here and there, not only, you know, with mobile gaming, but also with Kickstarter. And first off, we're going to start off with that. So first off, the Ouya is one of the most well-known things that Kickstarter has been used for. In case you do not know, Kickstarter is a pretty awesome platform for what it is. Essentially, a person goes on there, or a group of people or a company make an idea, they kind of show what it is, and they could either have a prototype of it, or it could be ready to retail, or it could just be an idea, whatever it is. And then they ask for donations, and they say, you know, at this increment, this will happen. At this increment, this will happen. We need this much money to start. If you donate this much, this will happen. If you donate this much, this is going to happen. Several big things have done it. I believe Coin started on Kickstarter. I want to say it did, because Coin, in case you don't know, I'm a bit iffy with it, but it is just a little card that is the same size as a credit card, and it is a digital credit card reader, so you can almost like copy your credit cards onto it, and then from there you can select what credit card you want to use and swipe it. So you could have up to like 5 or 10 cards on one little card, I want to say. This isn't about Coin though, but Mighty Number 9, which is, you know, kind of the new predecessor, not predecessor, the new successor, I meant to say, to Mega Man, that's not really Mega Man. It's created by the same guy who made the core Mega Man series. That was a Kickstarter campaign, and it has done exceptionally well. I actually did a video on that as well. And this was another thing. Now, at the time, you know, the Tegra 3 processor, it was brand new, and it was pretty much the best Android, you know, mobile processor that you could get out on the market. I have a Nexus 7 FHD 2013 model, but the 2012 model actually uses a Tegra 3 processor. I honestly don't know what this one uses off the top of my head. Sorry, Android people. But it was a very good processor, and they said, listen, this is the idea, we want to do this, we have the schematics. They just needed the funding, really. And people hopped on it. They said, you know what, a $99 game console? That's awesome. Let's go ahead and kick this. Let's go ahead and kickstart it. Let's go ahead and back and fund this and get as much money as possible. And it was a huge success. I believe they got way more than what they needed, and they were happy, and they ended up making the system. Now, when I say that, when I said game console right there, that's the first thing that happened. And it wasn't so much as the Ouya itself as it was the audience that it was intended to. You see, the people who were buying, I guess, or backing it, kickstarting, funding it, whatever you want to call it, they were expecting this thing to stack up against the 360 and the PS3. And you know what? I'm going to be straight up with you all. Yes, the 360 and the PS3, they're old systems. The 360 came out in 2005, the PS3 came out in 2006, but, you know, from last year, like 2012, 2013, you cannot tell me that a little $99 Android console can come even close to, running the games that those systems can. I mean, it's not going to happen. We're just now getting to the point where we're, surpassing PlayStation 2, Xbox style games on the mobile market. If that, several of them are still on that pace, which is great, because I never thought I would see that really on the mobile market, and they do look good, but, we're not going to be running a game like Halo that is, as intense or anything as Halo anytime soon on a mobile device. Or we might. But even if it comes in the next year or so, it wouldn't have been possible with a Tegra 3 chip. And because of that, people had such high exceptions for it. They had such high expectations and everything for it. Because they were expecting this little $99 box to compete with, their consoles that they got years ago, which it's just not going to happen, people. It's really not going to happen. Now, with the Kickstarting campaign, many people were kind of leery of that as well, because the thing is with Kickstarter, you are buying an idea and you are helping out, you are donating in a way, and whatever increment of money that you decide to donate, whatever you get back from that ends up being a bonus. So, for example, if I donate $10 to the Kickstarter campaign for that, I'm probably not going to get anything, but, I feel good. Now, let's say there are things that you can do, for example, with this Ouya. If you, I don't know the numbers, but let's say, let's say $300. If you donated over $300, then you would get an early system. There are things like that. There are incentives like that, which really make people hop on Kickstarter, and it, provides a big incentive, which is nice. And also, think about it like this. You're getting a brand new system before anyone else. That sounds kind of awesome, doesn't it? Well, we're going to talk about that too. I really feel like the Kickstarter itself was a big downfall of the Ouya as well. Because that was one thing. The systems that came out early. You see, they weren't really expecting this, but this is what ended up happening. I want to say starting at least 2 months before the console retailed, people were getting their systems early. And several people actually did not get their systems even until after the console retailed. These were like the Kickstarter edition systems. There's a difference between a Kickstarter system and a retail system. And the big difference between the two, the big thing that was bad, is that the retail system is actually better. So it would have been better to wait. Now, this is what happened, okay? Imagine you're one of the people that ended up funding the system beforehand and you put enough money to the point where you could get it early. So, you know what, let's just imagine it like this. Let's say you have an opportunity to get a PlayStation 4 2 months before it retails. You'd be pretty excited about that. Well, you get this PlayStation in the mail, you open it up, and it's awesome and everything, and then you hook it up, and it's slow. And it's not working that well. And everything just seems off. And more importantly, there's no games to play. And the games that might be on there might be early test builds that you might not be able to play. They might not be playable. They might just suck as well. And that was one big thing that happened with the Ouya. You see, when it came out, it only came out to the people who kickstarted the campaign. Which meant when they got it, they got, the pre-retail firmware on their systems, which was slow, it was buggy, it didn't perform that well, so automatically right off the bat, people had buyer's remorse and, Kickstarter's remorse, and they said, oh my god, I cannot believe I backed this system, it is so slow, it is unreliable, it's a terrible system, why did I do this, why did I waste my money on this? And then with that, there were no games on there, and the games that were on there were far and few in between. And that is because the Ouya had not retailed yet. It wasn't going to retail for another 2 months. All the people that were developing for the system at that time, or at least most of them, were waiting until the week that the Ouya retailed worldwide. So that way, their games would be up on the marketplace by the time it came out. Seems like a smart idea, but this Kickstarter just was not that good with that. Then also, with that, because so many people had backed it and got early systems, there were people who did not get their systems until, maybe a week before, or maybe even a week after the system actually retailed. So that was handled very poorly, but I think there were also just a bunch of orders to be put in hand, but it was handled very poorly. And these Kickstarter guys were pretty much the beta testers of the system, because they were the beta testers, not only they complained to the company making the system, but they also ended up complaining, you know, on YouTube, on Reddit, on any forums that they could find. And they said, you know, the system is slow, it's buggy, there's no games for it. And the disappointing thing was that by the time the system retailed, they had fixed up most of that stuff. But because it came out so early, and because people had it 2 months before retail, and it was not even ready until retail, it wasn't supposed to be ready until retail, people had given it such a negative rep. Or rap, I guess. Whatever it is. In addition to that, because the system had came out so early to Kickstarters, many people were selling the system early, not because they wanted the money, but because they did not like the system. So people were breaking street dates, which technically maybe they were, maybe they weren't because they owned the system. And many people who went out to buy the system, they didn't know when it was coming out. Nobody knew the release date. I don't even know the release date of it, honestly. I don't even know what time period it was supposed to come out. But it was handled very poorly, and honestly, they should not have given out the system that early, in my opinion. They should have done it at most a week before. But, you know, they did it a month or two early, and that really killed off a bunch of momentum for the system. And there were several people that they ended up canceling their pre-orders, or they decided we're not going to get it because they saw the system and they saw how bad it ran and how lackluster it was. So, what can you do, really? So the company really shot themselves in the foot on that. And probably the thing that I find the most offensive and the worst thing about this whole situation is the people, as I said, who got the Kickstarter editions of the Ouya, got the bad versions of the Ouya. By that I mean they were the first run models, and as I said, they were able to complain and say, oh, you know, the controller's not right, this isn't right, this. Not only they were beta testers, but by the time the retail system came out, they had actually made physical changes mostly to the controller. So what I'm saying is, the people who got the retail system had the better experience, and they had better hardware, like physically, they had better hardware than the people who paid more money to back it beforehand. So that wasn't done very well. And even by the time the system came out, handling like how it was sold and all that, I remember nobody knew where you could buy one. People didn't know if GameStop had them. People didn't know if a local mom and pop shop had them. People didn't know if, you know, Target, Walmart had them. Nobody knew. One thing with pricing as well, I want to say the $99 price is pretty good for what it is, but the controller itself is $50. So you can buy a second controller, but the controller is literally half the price of the system. When I saw the controller, I was thinking it would be, you know, maybe $25, $30, because it's essentially kind of a bootleg 360 controller, but it's wireless. But no, it's half the price of the system. So that turned off a lot of people too. They're just like, oh, you know, the system, the bundle for the system isn't that bad, but the controller itself is $50. I'm not going to pay half the system just to have a second controller. So the Kickstarter campaign, in my opinion, really killed off a lot of momentum for the Ouya and really did that. But then let's go ahead, fast forward to retail. So when the console finally retailed, when it finally came out, like for sure it actually came out, not a Kickstarter retail or anything. No, the system actually came out. There weren't really any games available. There weren't really any games that were optimized for the Ouya. If you know how to, you could actually sideload applications onto it because, as I said, it is an Android platform, and that was really appealing to people. But for example, you know, I saw one example where Grand Theft Auto Vice City, available on the Android marketplace. There was a gentleman who ended up getting the APK file for it, and he sideloaded it onto his Ouya, and it handled it terribly. And it wasn't because the Ouya wasn't powerful, but it was just, it wasn't designed properly for that device, because it wasn't really made in mind for the Ouya. So there are several things like that. On the Ouya marketplace itself, do you know what the flagship title was? Do you know what title was supposed to get the systems moving? What they were advertising was going to be on the system? Final Fantasy III. I'm not saying it's a bad game, but Final Fantasy III, a game that originally came out on the Super Nintendo, that has been ported and remade and remastered countless times, and that was already on the Android marketplace for quite some time before the system retailed. Final Fantasy III. That's what they were advertising. with the game selection, because it was Android, there was really no Ouya exclusivity, I want to say, because let's be real here. If somebody wants to program for the Ouya specifically, that's kind of dumb. It's an Android platform. Just put it up on the regular Android marketplace for everyone to play, and even, you can make it adaptable for the Ouya as well. But don't make it exclusive on the Ouya. That is kind of like, I have the example right here, I got this cartridge right here, Super Mario Bros. Versus Duck Hunt. The cartridge that every person who owns a Nintendo, or maybe they don't even own a Nintendo, has. Now, imagine with the Wii U, imagine that came out, and Nintendo said, oh, well, we got this new system out, we don't really have any original games for it out yet, but hey, you know what? You can buy Super Mario Brothers. I mean, we put that on the Wii U, right? You want to buy our system? Come on, we got Super Mario Brothers. It's kind of that same example right here. I'm not saying Super Mario Brothers is a bad game, by any means. It is a legendary game. It has paved the way for many other games. But why would you go out and buy a system for a game that you have already played, that has been out for ages, and that has been remastered and ported on every single thing possible, both retail and homebrew-wise? It's just not practical. It really isn't. And even with the game development on there, the Ouya really pushed, I want to say, if they didn't force free on developers, they really pushed it and recommended, hey, you should put your application out for free. And I don't really even know how advertisements and such were handled on the system. But because of that, if there's really, little to no money to be made on the system, and you're putting in your precious time and effort on here, and you're saying, I can make a lot more money if I put it on here as opposed to here, you're really not going to put it here, aren't you? So the Ouya really didn't have much of a game selection, and the game selection that was available on the Ouya marketplace was pretty lackluster, to say the least. It was just handled very poorly, and as I said, I feel like the Kickstarter really killed off a lot of this. Because especially developers, when they saw how bad the reception and the reactions to the Ouya were, they said, oh, I'm not going to program for this system. No, I can't waste my time on this. I'd rather program for a more reliable platform and such. Really, the only good things you can do with it now, I mean, you can do on any other Android device, and that's another thing. I have talked to some friends about this, and Amazon right now, they're doing an Android console, and it's going to be like $350 or so. I don't know why they're doing it, but I've told people, the Ouya is cool, and it's the same thing with Project Shield. Is kind of like a portable, it's kind of like, I don't know, a 3DS version of a Android system, I want to say. It's portable, it has a controller, all that stuff. But the Ouya and Project Shield are very niche, I want to say. And the thing I've told people is this, and I've actually dissuaded a lot of people from getting both the Ouya and Project Shield. That's a whole nother thing, but I've told people, why would you buy why would you want to buy that when you could, get a tablet like this for, $200 some, maybe even less, and then you could hook up a controller to it, or you could even do, an output of any kind to it. It just doesn't seem that practical to me, especially with, any tablet like that. Like, I have the Nexus 7 there. So many people are making their applications compatible for it and everything, where I don't really know why you would do something like that. Also, because the system took so long to make, and because the mobile market moves as fast as it does, the Tegra 3, when it came out, was already outdated. It went from being an amazing processor to an average processor. So it didn't work out that well. Honestly, now what a lot of people buy the Ouya for and want it for is as kind of like a home theater system. So they have, XBMC on there. People like to use emulators and ROMs and such on there as well, which all those things are pretty easy to put on just because, as I said countless times now, it is Android compatible. It's Android OS, so anything that you're going to do on your Android phone or Android tablet, you're going to be able to do on the Ouya. Pretty much most of that stuff. But there were just so many issues with just handling, selling it, and all that, and it's really disappointing to see because it could have been a lot better, but I really feel like, honestly, if I was in charge of that, if I could go back in time and kind of like talk to the developers, I would say do not put out the Ouya as early as you did. Because that was a really bad decision on their part, and it resulted in a huge amount of backlash. But even last thing I was going to say, really, with the emulators and such, as I said, you know, I'll go back to the phone tablet thing. Why would you do that on there if you could do it on your phone or tablet? You could do it on a PC as well. So you could do things like that. Many people were also saying, this for more tech-savvy people, many people also said, you know, why would I get an Ouya? Yeah, it's $100. It's cheap, but why would I get that when I could, you know, take an old PC and turn it into a home theater PC or put XBMC or anything like that on there? Last thing I want to say is, you know, this little device right here is actually pretty awesome. This is a Google Chromecast. It came out after the Ouya. It is a $35 HDMI-compatible streaming device. That's a bit of a mouthful. The SDK just came out for it. This is the developer's kit, like the public developer's kit, essentially. Now, this already has Plex on it, which, if you don't know, you can pretty much load the application onto your computer, stream things over to a device like this. But now that SDK is out, people are predicting that XBMC is going to be out for it as well, and many other things. You can already watch YouTube, Netflix, Hulu, I think, I don't know. I don't know for sure. But you can already watch things like that on here. So if you're using it as a home theater type device, you can kind of get one of these, and you'll be good. $35, and it just hooks up through HDMI. It's not too bad. Really, the problem is there's so many alternatives out that are cheaper or better or both compared to the Ouya. And it's disappointing because I've told people, I said, you know what, the Ouya could have been a success if not only they didn't put it out early, but if people knew what they were buying. But as I said, people were expecting this little $99 Android box to compete with their PS3s and 360s. That's not what it is. If you realistically looked at it for what it was, it's not a bad system. Now, do I own one? No. Would I be interested in owning one? Honestly, I'll say this. If I can, I've told people this too. If I can find one for $50, I would get it. And I'm not saying that because I'm trying to demean the system or anything, but it's like, I have a tablet, I have a phone, I have another Android phone around here somewhere that's barely working. So I'm not in need of another Android device. I'm also due for an upgrade, so probably in a few months I'm going to be getting a different phone here, but mobile gaming, hardware or software, it moves so fast, it's hard to do, and really, I don't think that having an Android home console would be very viable, especially with systems like the Wii U, the PS4, and the Xbox One just now out. So that's the story of the Ouya. Really, the system itself was not that bad. The marketing was bad, and the marketing, in my opinion, ended up killing the system before it even retailed. Anyways, this is Mr. Mario, signing off. Thank you for watching, anyone. And if you made it to the end of this video, if you have like any other topics that you'd like me to cover in Gaming Goofs, let me know. I've pretty much kind of exhausted the systems I want to talk about, because Project Shield got a mention in here, but it's not really worth making a whole video over, in my opinion. But I might start doing some more game companies and such soon. Maybe even series. Who knows? Anyways, signing off for real this time. Later, everyone.